At InDigital, we know that public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only i3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
Rapid Deploy believes that every public safety agency, regardless of size, should have access to the data they need when it matters most. That's why, since 2016, our mission has been to reduce emergency response times and improve public safety. We are the industry's only integrated emergency response platform. Our web-based cloud platform includes analytics, mapping, dispatch, and mobile apps, purpose-built for 911 in the 21st century. Visit www.rapiddeploy.com to learn how we enable effective, efficient, data-driven emergency response.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital as well as Rapid Deploy, and as always, there is a lot going on, and we are getting pretty close to the registration for Dare to Be Great 3 coming out. This virtual conference, is going to be going on June 7th through the 10th of 2021, and this will complete the trilogy of Dare to Be Great. Does that mean this is the last one? Maybe. I'm not sure. I'm thinking it will be. It has been an amazing experience, and just to be able to give back this way has been superb. So there are a lot of other virtual events that are going on that I'm running actually as Within the Trenches Media, which is why I'm thinking about this Dare to Be Great to be the last one, and then focus on all the other ones that are going out. Who knows? Maybe in a few years or something, I'll have another one or something. But we'll see how it goes. Either way, it has been an amazing experience. So look out for that registration coming out. It'll probably be the second week of April. And all of the information on the speakers, their sessions, everything will be going out there, as well as the sponsors. And I can't thank the sponsors enough, and especially to the patrons for everything. We've got new content that's going to be coming up as well. And I'm very excited for that. So thank you for all that you do. And just for being fans, for supporting, and for sharing, and all the kudos. So thank you to all of you. And I'm excited for my guest today. We met, actually, I'm trying to remember now when we actually met. I'm thinking about 2 different conferences now that we were at, but one of the ones for sure was Catalina conference. And I just heard a lot about my guest, and we're going to learn a lot more here today. So my guest today is Charlie Cullen, and he's the Technical Services Director for the UCSF Police Department out of California.
Good morning, Ricardo. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Now, when was it that was it Catalina or was it before? I feel like it might have been like an SBP conference or something. I know we've spoken before, even before that.
But certainly at Catalina. That's the California conference, and it's very well attended. We usually get 500 or so dispatchers and supervisors and managers. So that's probably where we met. And I greatly appreciate you letting me participate on your podcast series. What a great program and what tremendous outreach you have in the 911 community, Ricardo.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I've heard a lot of stories about you, good things, of course. Good things. I've had a few of our mutual friends telling me, actually, you need to get Charlie on, and like, well, we'll get him on. And then we spoke, and at Cal Nina and all, and we've been trying to do this ever since then, and here we are. We're about to get this going, so I'm excited to have you.
Well, this is great. I'm looking forward to it.
So I want to get started with how you got into public safety to begin with. Now, we were talking a little bit before this, and you were doing something else, like in the airline industry, right? Before dispatching, before public safety?
I was working for an airline. I started with an airline called PSA, and I don't know, many people probably don't remember this airline, but it was an all their airplanes had smiles on the front. And it really was a California-based carrier, really the model for what Southwest Airlines is now. But they were bought by another airline, was bought by another airline, and so on and so forth. And in the mid-'90s, I had now started a family, and it was I could see that the airline industry did not have a great future. In fact, I was offered a job as a supervisor in Pittsburgh, and my wife said, "No, we're not going to Pittsburgh." So I needed to look for something else, and I was interested in public safety. And my parents had a house up in Southern Oregon, and we were up there vacationing, and I was looking around to see what opportunities there were up there. And there was a test for public safety dispatcher for the Oregon State Police, or telecommunications, they called the position. And I took it, and they interviewed me, and I was hired. So I took the opportunity, and that really started my career, was with the Oregon State Police. Very different than municipal, I would say, policing, in that it was the 6 southernmost counties in Oregon, very rural, very different kind of calls than you would get in the city, or what I had experienced in Palo Alto subsequently. But a great place to start, great organization, and really an interesting place to work.
Now, okay, so then you didn't have any public safety background going into this at all? You were pretty green?
Not at all. I had a cousin who was working for the CHP. He was a CHP officer, but that was all I really knew about public safety, to be honest with you. I had worked in operations for the airlines, where you do weight planning, load planning, stuff like that. So I thought it might be a job that had a similar fast-paced environment, that quick decision making, and that turned out to be true. So it did help my experience in that. And my previous experience certainly helped me in the dispatch world.
Did you have any experience with just people that were coming in and dealing with the airline as well? Because customer service that way, at least from what I've seen, traveling all over the place, the general public there can be things can happen.
Yes, challenging at times. I absolutely, Ricardo. I think I did work in customer service for a couple of years, and I think that helped me, sort of dealing with people that were very upset, because people did get upset when their travel plans were canceled or things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, that was another component of my experience. It certainly helped me dealing with call taking and some of the other aspects of dispatching.
So what was it like when you ended up putting in your application and everything? Did they were you allowed to go and sit in and kind of take it all in, or did you just go in for the interview and they're like, "Hey, you're in"?
Basically, that was it.
Yeah.
They graded the test, and they called me and said, "Hey, you did well enough on this test to be considered as a candidate." They did a short interview, and they said, "When can you start?" So I think things were a little different back then. I mean, the training was, you were on the circuit, and you had to learn pretty quickly. In fact, I remember that for test day, to test data entry, you would enter yourself into the live system, as a suspect, or your vehicle is being stolen. And if you didn't remember to take that out, you could have a lot of problems. But that was back in the day when, I think I started on October 15th, and I was actually working solo the day before Thanksgiving. And the reason why I remember that is the troopers were out doing enforcement action. So they were pulling over everything that moved and, running plates. And up there, the registered owner's name and DOB is on the registration. So they go 1195 on this vehicle and the mail RO. So you'd be running the plate and running the person as fast as you possibly could. The advantage of that is you got really good at running plates and people because it's fast paced. And but I'll tell you, I still remember to this day that Wednesday before Thanksgiving and my kind of baptism by fire.
Wow. Okay, so what is that? Just shy of like a month and a half training?
There was. They eventually sent me to. They had an academy, a statewide dispatchers academy in January, but I'd already been working live on the circuit for quite a while. So, but it was you either learned or you didn't. That's kind of how it was. And we would dispatch. We were responsible for 2 counties, so you would have 2 counties on the radio. We did have call takers, so I was hired as a radio dispatcher right off the bat, and so you would be sent the calls, and you would be responsible for dispatching the troopers out in the field, and a very different experience in retrospect to what I encountered later in my career. But there'd be one of those counties, I think it was Josephine County, because the funding was so bad for the SO and some of the municipal police departments that 2 troopers were the only law enforcement at night in the entire county. So it was a different world.
Oh man. Okay, so thinking about where we're at now with technology versus what it was like for you in the beginning. I mean, how much of a change has there been? Because as you're talking about having to run plates over and over and over and over, and all this that you're doing, and you started out on the radios and all. How much of a difference is there?
Oh, it's a tremendous difference with all the tools and the technology that we have now. And interestingly enough, when I went from Oregon State Police had CAD at that time, they had computer aided dispatch, and so that made things a little easier. Then I went to Palo Alto. They were still punching cards and running people on a separate system. So you would think, Palo Alto, the birthplace of Silicon Valley and all that, would be ahead of the curve, but they really weren't at that time. Now they certainly have done a lot more, obviously, since then. But very different. Punching a card, writing the information. The one thing I will say about not having technology is you really had to learn the geography of the area, the beats, the reporting districts, where all the streets were, because now you have a map, and the map pops up, and there's your incident, and there's the route the officer or responding personnel should take, and it's all there. You don't have to really know it as well. And so that was one of the things that I think, a couple of years later we got CAD and we brought that up, but it really helped me know the city and the area by having to learn that from a map.
Yeah, and so I fully agree there, where memorization definitely helps, especially if your system goes down.
That's
if you all and hopefully that system doesn't go down, but it's all here, and it makes things a lot faster. We had our computer aided dispatch, our CAD, where we would type in all of the information for those who are watching and not fully sure or listening and not fully sure what we're talking about here. This is the system where when we're taking the phone calls, we're typing in all of the information, the address, the narrative, the incident type, whether it be, disorderly, domestic, whichever. This is the information that the radio dispatcher ends up getting from the call taker, who then gives it over the air on the radio to those out in the field that are going to this call. But this is also the information that goes out to their laptops, to their MDTs. So, we would have, it would be all of this information, right, that is going out. And it was interesting because it was an older system, right? So you would have to have it memorized, because you wouldn't be able to get past a certain spot unless you had the exact, of course, location, like township, city, whichever. They've got these 2-digit codes, and then you'd have to have the incident code, and then you would have to have the ORI. So you're moving really fast, and in this older system, you had to have it memorized so that you could get past the certain part, or you end up wasting time there. So it's interesting now, and like I said, with memorization, I agree that it made it a lot more efficient, I guess, a lot faster and everything else. But with the newer systems, I remember, some trainers saying, well, as long as they know where to find it, that I'm good with that. And I would say, well, yeah, but what if the system goes down? You don't have it in a booklet. What are you going to do?
You're absolutely right, Ricardo. And then nowadays, if you have to switch to your backup, it's a much harder transition because people are not used to that at all. And it really throws everything off. So you're right. We were a little more agile, I think, when we didn't have all this technology. That being said, the technology is a tremendous asset and really helps us.
Yeah. So. Yeah, the technology is great. It's amazing. But sometimes it can be really, really good, but hinder just a little bit when we're talking about this. If there isn't a backup, the brain is usually it'll be the backup because you got to memorize that stuff. Now, with when you were starting out, what was that like for you, that transition from going from the airline industry now into public safety? Was there ever a moment when you first started out that you were just kind of blown away, thinking, maybe what have I gotten into?
Yeah, for quite a while. I mean, for many months, because it's such a different atmosphere, particularly up there in Oregon. It was really a paramilitary organization with the top down from, there was a captain in charge of the district and lieutenants, et cetera, and so forth, and very regimented, very sort of strict protocols, et cetera, that they had there. So yeah, coming from the airlines where it was all sort of I don't know, a more loose atmosphere and everybody was kind of having fun. We did have fun. It was very much, you realize this is a serious job and you got to take it seriously and you need to be on your game every day when you sit down in that chair. That was the big difference.
How big of an area did all of you cover, and how many dispatchers were on at a time?
We would have 4 dispatchers, but sometimes 5. So there were 6 counties in Southern Oregon, and you would take 2 counties. These were the large, huge geographic areas. I mean, some of these counties are probably as big as some of the smaller states back east. And you'd have a call taker, sometimes 2 call takers, and then 3 radio dispatchers who would each have 2 counties to dispatch. So you're listening to multiple radio channels. So it really was a huge benefit to me long-term because you had to pay attention. You had to be constantly monitoring the radio traffic, constantly aware of where your units were, and really, they demanded a lot from you in that job.
Yeah, and there wasn't any of the AVLs back then either. The automatic vehicle locators. So you had to keep track of everything.
Where your people were in the field, absolutely. And it was very different. We also had all of the game wardens were actually troopers, so they could switch back and forth between. So we had all these other kind of calls that would come in there, illegal hunting, people without permits, and it was a whole different world from for a guy who grew up in the Bay Area.
So thinking about like the DNR and everything, I remember taking a few calls where somebody would call in, and it would be deer hunting season. It had just started, and I'd get a call from someone who said, I need somebody to come out. I need an officer to come out to give me a roadkill permit. Now, for those who are watching and listening, and you might not know this, but if someone ends up hitting like a deer, let's say someone hits a deer and the deer is still in, okay shape, the officers might get us on the radio and say, hey, go down the roadkill list, and because people are signed up, and you can call them and say, hey, an officer's out with the vehicle, they hit a deer's still in okay shape, if you want to come and get it. And they would just issue a roadkill permit, and then the person could take it. Well, with this call and a few others, but this one specifically that I'm talking about now, I remember this guy calling in and asking for an officer to come out to his address to give a roadkill permit. And I said, did it happen right outside of your house? Oh no, it happened like a few miles away. I'm home now. You brought it home? And the person says, yeah, I brought it home. I already cut it up and cleaned it and everything. And I thought, oh no. I said, okay, well, you're not supposed to do that, but I'll have an officer give you a call. So the officer and a DNR unit go out there. They confiscated all that meat.
And that's not uncommon. I mean, there was a lot of stuff like that going on. In fact, I think that the troopers set up a sting where they had a fake deer, well, not a fake deer, but like a stuffed deer out in a field because people would shoot at deer from their cars. Obviously, not a safe practice at all. And they would set up this deer, and then they would, arrest and find people that were shooting at this deer from their car. So there was a lot of stuff like that I never imagined I would be dealing with, but it was a real education in terms of what the rules are.
Whoa, no way. I think that's the first that I may have heard of that. There were other times when I was working. So when I first started working out in Florida, our records clerk there, her husband was a Florida State trooper. And I remember him saying, don't go out, in such and such area of the highway during this day. And if you do, make sure you're not speeding because there's going to be a sting. And I don't know if it's like this in every state, but in Florida, when they're running something like that, and I don't know if it's changed now, but from what I was told back then, they have to announce that they're going to do this. Like they basically have to advertise. So it was in the newspaper that they were going to be doing this. And I believe it might have been on the news as well. They were saying on this day, at this time, in this area, they're going to be doing this. And a few days later, actually it might have been a week later, I had the newspaper, and in the newspaper, it showed a person who was like dressed like they were a construction, worker. And that person was actually a captain, and they were clocking people as they were going by in this area that had actual construction going on, but they had announced, we're going to be running a sting here. So just so you know. And so they had the picture of the captain who was clocking, and then they had a picture over the highway, over the hill going down, troopers just lined up, waiting.
Oh, there's some of those big enforcement actions are really amazing. And, they used aircraft in Oregon as well, where they'd, track from an aircraft and have troopers set up to pull people over. They had I-5, which was a big, obviously a big highway with a lot of traffic, commercial traffic, as well as traffic. And it was a lot of stuff happened on I-5. We had some really, a couple of crazy calls on that.
What's interesting is you talking about how they do that in the air. And in my travels, I have seen signs that says that, speed or whichever is tracked in the air. I can't remember what exactly it says on the sign. And I always thought up until this point that you even said this, that, man, how do they do that? Like, they probably don't really do that. Maybe they're just saying that, but you have confirmed that.
Well, you know how they do it is there's markings. You'll see them on the side of the freeway.
Mm-hmm.
Up in the air, they have a stopwatch, and they start the stopwatch when the car hits those markings, and they stop it when it gets to another set of markings farther down the freeway, and they can do the math very quickly and see how many miles an hour you're traveling at, and quickly dispatch a trooper to pull you over.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, you heard it here. That is craziness, man. Okay, so how long were you over at with the state police before you ended up switching to the next one? Because you dispatched for about 4 years, right? So
right.
were the 4 years the whole time there in Oregon, or was it split between different agencies?
It was split between different agencies. So for about a year and a half, I was with the Oregon State Police, and my wife and I thought about moving up to Southern Oregon, but in the end decided not to. We had a house in Mountain View, and so I was applying for Bay Area agencies, and I was fortunate enough to get hired by the Palo Alto Police Department, which really was my hometown. I had grown up in Palo Alto, so it was kind of like going home, and that was actually ended up being a great move. Great agency to work for. A lot of good people there. I had a great career with Palo Alto, so it was a good move for me ultimately. Although the Oregon State Police was the perfect place to start out. It gave me a lot of experience, good organization, great people there as well.
So between Oregon State and then out in Palo Alto, do you remember some of those earlier calls? Even your first one, maybe, or just some of those earlier ones that you took?
Well, the ones that there was a couple of ones that stand out, particularly from Oregon. The calls were so one of them, one of the first calls I got was Main Street Dave has been shot by the Bushman brothers in Wolf Creek, which was a small town, very small, maybe 1,000 people, and very rural. And the Bushman brothers, it took them quite a while to track these guys down. But yeah, Main Street Dave, I'm not sure what he did for a living, but that one stands out. But an even bigger one was we had an incident in Oregon where a guy went into a child care center up a county north of where we dispatched for, and went in there and tried to assault the woman who ran it, fired a shot that went over her head, but grabbed a 6-year-old girl, put her in the car with him, and started driving south on I-5. Now, obviously, everybody's firing shots out of the vehicle at the troopers that are pursuing him, and I get the call, hey, it's going to be coming your way. It's coming into Douglas County, which was the next county. So we used cell phones and called the troopers on their cell phones and said, hey, get ready, this thing is coming. And it turned into a pursuit. They put out spike strips. That didn't stop this guy. Eventually, he flipped the car over in the median. We had I-5 stopped in both directions on the helicopters overhead. The media, it was a huge incident, and it was my incident. So, I was actually dripping with sweat. The captain for the entire region was standing behind me and, watching this. And so you could, it's a life or death situation. Eventually they had a sniper that terminated this guy in the car, and the little girl was okay. She was fine. I actually talked to the trooper that drove her to the hospital just to have her check out. And what she said was, my parents always told me to put my seatbelt on. So she put her seatbelt on, and when the car rolled over, she was okay, and this guy got all jumbled up. But it's an emotional call to this day for me. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
Fortunately, this little girl was okay, but it was quite an experience.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it. Was there ever any type of like debriefing or anything that happened or that you were involved with?
Eventually there was, and we got an award for the critical incident award for not just me but the entire center, because obviously it's a group effort when you have something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very much. After that, you realize you can do the job. If you can do that, you can do anything, right? In terms of dispatching and handling a critical situation. But to this day, that's probably the most the biggest incident I've been involved in, at least personally, the way it affected me. I think as you get older, you're more experienced. Sometimes it doesn't affect you as much, even when you do deal with fairly, I've dealt with in progress shootings, homicides, etc. since then. But that one was really the one that struck me the most emotionally and influenced my career going forward.
Wow. So you were on radios this whole time, right? And so all of this is playing out, and I mean, I'm guessing all of that main traffic stayed right there. Just your channel. You've got everyone screaming that way, trying to, I guess, get involved in the chase as well, right?
Yeah, the chase, and you had the SWAT team responding from the SO. You had helicopters overhead. You had the Oregon Department of Transportation blocking off the freeway. You had all this stuff going on. So yeah, it was chaos, but it was controlled chaos.
Right. And I mean, but then, you've got someone who's behind you who's like watching and listening as all this is going on as well. And just thinking about that, oh man,
Well, it
it's,
was one of the few times I had seen the captain in the dispatch center. Let me just put it that way.
oh man. Yeah. So that definitely has to be even more nerve wracking,
Oh yeah,
to create even more sweat that's coming down because you already have a crazy situation that's going on that you are the one you're on point with everyone else. And I think some people do it different, but whenever there was a high priority call and I was on radio, whoever was the one who was on point, the first person who was there, the head of the chase or whichever, when they would throw out a location, I would repeat it really fast and repeat that information so that anybody else, that is going to it, they would hear it as well. So you are already doing all of this stuff, but you also have someone who's watching and listening. And man, I can't even imagine but everything came out all right. And you're here. You stuck with it. It was
oh yeah.
How
Well,
early on was that in your career?
I was just about a year on, so it was in October. I started in October, and it was the following October. And you know what? I tell you, it was a team effort because everybody else took everything else away. Right? I just had to deal with that incident and the radio. Everything else, calling the ODOT, doing notifications, all that stuff is the team took care of it. So it made my job that much easier. I could focus on what was happening out there in the incident on the radio.
Man. Now, I remember working a domestic once where the husband was intoxicated. He was outside on the deck, and I believe he had a shotgun with him. His wife was inside, and I remember because I was on radios, so I had all the traffic, and I remember them calling in SWAT and them having a sniper there and listening to the sniper say, I have him in my sight, just, standing by, just waiting, because they were going to try to, neutralize the situation before having to do anything like that. And, luckily they didn't have to do it. But I remember when that happened, I remember when I heard this person, and this person is a friend of mine, when I hear him on the radio and say that, I remember in my head thinking this shit just got real, like even more real than it was already.
Yeah, the captain, they were communicating with the SWAT teams independently, not on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
The captain said they're going to take the shot. Like, told me that right behind me. And they did. Fortunately, everything turned out okay.
Wow. What do you, with your career that you have had, so you had those 4 years in dispatch, but you've had what, 25 years total, right, in public safety now that you're doing. Is there anything that you've taken, whether it be from that call or just your time in dispatch throughout all of this, maybe in some sort of tutelage for those that are coming into that next generation of 911, those, dispatchers and call takers that are coming in, is there anything that you take from this that, you kind of hold on to and pass on to other generations?
Well, I think it is a noble profession. I think that's the thing I take away from it. You don't have to worry about why you're getting up every morning. You're going out and doing something that makes a difference. It absolutely makes a difference. And it's keeping the community and the officers and the other responders safe. You're the first of the first responders. And that is such an important job. And I think it's critical that it gets recognized as such at both the state and national level. And that's something we can talk about a little later. And I think as my career progressed, hopefully I kept that in mind, that the people that are doing the work are the important people, the people that are doing the dispatching and making sure that their environment and they get the things they need to be able to be successful in their job. Because you're only as good as the people you're for and with. Mm-hmm. That's really the most critical thing.
Do you think having all this experience in dispatch and everything helped as you started moving up and moving up, so you were in dispatch, but did you end up moving up to like supervisor or trainer, and then like deputy director? How did your transition work?
So I was a dispatcher in Palo Alto for once I come over from the Oregon State Police, and then they had lead dispatchers, but they called them chief dispatchers. There were four of us, and I was promoted a little more than a year, I think, after I got in there to a chief. And then I worked because we were implementing CAD, and it was the same CAD system that we had in Oregon for some reason. And they said, "Well, you would know a little bit about CAD, so you can help with the integration." My first thought was, "What? You went for everybody in the Silicon Valley, and you got to me?" At that time, I didn't know a lot about technology or technical by any means. But that ended up being a huge career boost because I had to learn it. I had to learn about CAD. I had to learn about both the front end and the back end, the administrative side of it. And I was ultimately promoted to the comm manager in, I think, 2000, something like that. I spent 8 years as a comm manager, which is really where as a middle manager, you learn how to manage people and give them the support that they need. And then ultimately, I was promoted to the division director, and I did that job for 12 years, and really had opportunity to do a lot of exciting things, implementing a new CAD system, RMS, a radio system. I think the thing, once again, you got to keep in mind when you're implementing technology is, what is the impact going to be on people, the people that are going to be using that technology. You may think it's the latest and greatest thing that ever came out of the box, but if the people who use it don't like it or use it, and it doesn't help them do their job better, then it's probably not a good choice. So always making sure that you had dispatchers involved in the decision-making process when you pick the technology was an important thing that I think helped the successful implementation of the technology we brought on board. So really, I had a great career at Palo Alto. A friend of mine is the chief here at UCSF PD, and asked me to come over, and I'm in the middle of upgrading the comm center here and the technology. So really an exciting opportunity.
Is there anything that you can think of maybe or pinpoint as to, maybe it was one of the reasons that you wanted to move up? As I mentioned before, and people that I've spoken to, that have moved up, whether it be trainer, lead supervisor, whichever, there was a moment that they, and maybe not a specific call or anything, but there was a moment where they really, it came to them that they wanted to help either teach that next generation that was coming up, or they wanted to move up more so that they could make a change in not only the industry but also their center as well.
Well, I think that's it, and I think it's the change portion is what drove me. I mean, I think when I first started, dispatching was emerging as a profession. At first, it was, people thought, well, what's dispatching? Oh, it's like typing in phones or something. Well, that's not what it is at all. And getting the recognition that the dispatch profession deserves, and recognition within the department. Ultimately, the technical services director is a command staff position, and you have I was very fortunate to have a voice and a say in what happened in that department. And I think that's what one of the main things that drove me is, let's get the recognition and the resources that we need for dispatchers. It's such a critical part of the response continuum. So that was one of the big things that drove me, was realizing this is an emerging profession, and we have an opportunity here to raise the profile of what dispatching is, and to have dispatch involved in the decision-making process and being recognized as a true partner with the other disciplines in public safety.
As we talk about all these changes and everything, and especially technology, what are some of the things that you can think of that I don't know, maybe are kind of things to look out for? Kind of for an example, we've been talking for years now about Next Generation 911, right? And a lot of people were concerned with text to 911, that it would be overwhelming. And what did we find out? That it really wasn't. And I always credit it to a good public education campaign, if you can tell people that text to 911 doesn't take over voice, that it's, your kind of your last resort, that would voice isn't enough, use your texting, do that instead. And of course, as long as it's available in the area. But other things that people are concerned with is video and pictures and all of that. And there are some areas that are using this already. They're doing all of this. So in this technology change, where it seems like 911 is finally coming, catching up with everything that's going on, I guess what is the impact, or maybe some concerns that you might have, or that you can think of, that will impact dispatch, whether it be, I guess now would be really what they're going to end up seeing, not just hearing.
Ricardo, I think that's a really good point. And the text to 911 and the wireless 911 is another great example, where everybody thought we're going to be overwhelmed by these phone calls. Well, the phone calls have to go somewhere. And, now 80% of the phone calls are from wireless devices. So that's they need to come into the PSAP. Next generation 911, I think, adds some additional components that we do have to be careful about. And you hit the nail right on the head when you said video. Do we want to expose dispatchers to video that could be really shocking? An accident victim, somebody who has been the victim of a crime, those kinds of things. So how do we take all of this data that we'll be getting in next generation, sort it for what's actionable, what needs to go out right now, what's pertinent, what's actionable, what's evidence? Do we have to save some of this stuff for evidence? Is there, there's a lot of decisions that will have to be made. Does that mean there is a new position in the comm center, or positions that is data management, right?
Mm-hmm.
That sorts through all of this and goes, okay, this needs to go right out to the MDCs in the field. The classic example is a missing child. You have a picture of a missing child. Can you get that, push it out right away so everybody has it on their MDCs? There's a lot of things to think about there, right? What is pertinent and actionable in terms of all this data we're going to get? Are we going to be getting people sending us cat videos and stuff? We don't know what we're going to get. So
right.
That is how to manage this data, and is it going to take an additional level of training for people to handle all of this and sort through it all? I think that's the challenge for us. Yes, we want the data because you can make better decisions and hopefully have a faster response, but how do you manage that data?
Mm-hmm.
Who makes the decisions on what data is used and not used?
Yeah, exactly. So there's, the rich data that's coming in is great. It's amazing. How do we figure out, and like I said, some of this is already being done. How do you visualize this? How does it go out there now? And who's going to be pushing it out there? Are some of these programs or parts of this technology going to be where it's set up as, profiles? For example, only the supervisors will, under their profile, they will be the ones who receive these images. Or will it be images that they receive and then they can simply send it off to the officer? Do you want, dispatch to see this? And I don't think there's a current standard. I believe there are standards that are being built currently. All of this stuff is being, talked about. They're being built, but I don't think there's an actual standard yet. And you can correct me if there is a standard, but I don't believe that there's actually one at the moment, only that it's being worked on. So that's another thing as well. You got to think about that. But also, what is one of the things that we've been talking about for now 5 or 6 years or so? The mental health and wellness of our 911 dispatchers and call takers. This is going to be one more thing that you add. Now you're not just visualizing with your own brain, trying to piece together what you're listening to. You're going to be seeing these things. So how much more are we, do we have to prepare our call takers and dispatchers for what it is that they're going to see? That's a big thing. And that's something that we definitely need to be moving towards as well.
It really is, and part of the wellness continuum, and Nina actually has a good program on their website about wellness. But that's something that you need to take into consideration. There may be people who said, "I didn't sign up for this. I don't want to see a dead body. I don't want to see somebody who's been maimed in a car accident." That's not what I think that the job was. So how do we figure out how that's supposed to work. You're exactly right. Who's going to see the data and how do we share it and all those sorts of things. And I don't know that there have been any recommended protocols or standards. I think NINA is working on it to a certain extent, and some of the other public safety organizations, but that's really something that has to be sorted through and given real consideration, and not just imposing the technology on the PSAPs and saying, here you go, you're drinking from the fire hose. You know, it's we've got to take a close look at it and see what the best way to proceed.
For sure. When you started out, did you ever think you'd be here at this point?
Honestly, no, I didn't. At the time, I was thinking more about I need a new career. I've got a young family, and this looks like a good place to start. So that was really what was on my mind at the time. And you know, I think as you progress in life and your experiences kind of change who you are and your perspective, and that certainly did for me. I mean, I'm really fortunate. I've had a great career, and it all started with you know, taking a test to be a dispatcher for the Oregon State Police. So I've been really lucky.
I had to ask because there have been a few times where, you know, I'm sitting here in this room, or, you know, I'm on a run or a walk or whichever, and I just take a moment to step back and reflect and think, man, a lot has happened since the beginning, and I never thought that it would be like this. I never thought at some point I would say that I'm going on 20 years in public safety. It's crazy to think, but it's an amazing industry profession, and I love it. But I just had to ask because I guess I just wanted to see if I'm not the only one. So
no, you're right. And you know, one of the things you mentioned there, you know, 20 years in public safety, and that's something we need to do so that dispatchers have a career, right? They have a decent retirement. They have the benefits that they need, and that's not always the case across the country. That's something we really need to work towards, and part of that is getting them reclassified as first responders. I think that's the first step. I mean, you should be able. It's a really challenging profession. People work very, very hard. They work a ton of overtime. They work different shifts, holidays, weekends, all that stuff. They deserve a decent retirement and decent benefits, and I think that's one of the things. That's the top issue, I think, in this country for all of our dispatchers.
yeah, that is. So let's segue now from your story a little bit here, and it's not too far because it's still part of your story, but we've learned a lot about you, and, you know, from the beginning to present time. And so I want to segue into something that you're doing right now. Now, before we actually get to this part, you have been part of California's NINA chapter, right?
Yes, I've served on the board of Cal NINA and was the president a few years ago, quite a few years ago now, but I've always been active. I was the Cal NINA representative for 2 terms on the State 911 Advisory Board, appointed by then Governor Brown. So I've been very fortunate to be involved in NINA, and I think that's something that dispatchers should think about too, is get involved in your local or your state organizations. It really broadens your horizon. It gives you, you know, you realize you're not the Lone Ranger, that it's not just, you know, sometimes we get isolated in our centers and we think that we're the only ones dealing with the issues and problems that are out there. But getting involved in your state chapter, your state organization, and trying to attend conferences and training really broadens your perspective, and you realize you're not alone in some of the issues and stuff that you're dealing with. So it's a great way. It certainly helped me, and it helped me in my career as well, being involved in Cal NINA and the larger national.
You know, that's one of the things that I find that you know, a lot of people don't know and don't understand. So it's like, for example, for me, when I started doing all of this, it was 2013. I was at the Michigan NINA conference, and I had only been to another conference prior to that, the year before there in Michigan, and that was when I found out that there was actually a mothership, that there was there was National NINA, because up until that point, I thought that the 2 main organizations, that they were just chapters, that each state had a chapter. I didn't know that there was a mothership. So when I talk to people sometimes, even today, people, they don't know. So if you can kind of give an overview, I know you kind of talked about, just a moment ago on, what Calnina was like for you and everything, but for those who are watching and listening, whether it be, the state chapter or specifically the national chapter or the national organization rather, what is it all about? Why should dispatch look into becoming a member? I always hear, your voice matters. Well, in this case, how does their voice matter? How does it impact what it is that the national organization does?
Well, that's a great question, and I think there's a number of things that the state and national organizations do. They advocate for better working conditions for dispatchers. They provide training on a variety of issues, both now remote training and in-person training. One of the big things they do is advocate on legislation, and there's a critical bill for Next Generation 911 that's going to be part of the Lift America infrastructure bill that's going to be put forward here. It may even be this week. And there is a really $13 billion in that bill to finance Next Generation 911 across the country. And not just the technology, but the training that goes into it and a lot of other things. So it's a critical bill, and it's probably a once in a generation opportunity for us to get the money we need to do this across the country. Now, in California, I've been very fortunate that our funding mechanism is really strong, and that's in great part due to our state office that has taken a role in getting the funding. And we're rolling out Next Generation 911 right now. But that's not going to be possible for a lot of smaller states across the country. So that's one area where NENA, APCO, and these other organizations advocate and lobby literally on the Hill to get us the money that we need to do our jobs. So training, advocating for better standards and benefits for dispatch, and advocating on the legislative side. And they have both the state chapters and the national chapter have really good conferences with breakout sessions where, and the networking itself is as beneficial as anything. Meeting other people from other centers, across your state and across the country when you go to the national conference. You make connections that will last you a lifetime. And if that is one of the most important things about it, like I said, and I really, in Palo Alto and hopefully here in UCSF, we'll try to get as many of the dispatchers to attend the state conference and even the national conference when they resume those post-COVID, hopefully. So a lot of benefits to it. The online stuff is great. There's a lot of online, the wellness continuum online is really great on the NENA website. And some of the other things that keep you up to date on the issues, some of the forums and chat rooms, et cetera. It's all part of, communication about our profession and where it's going.
Now, you're running for the second VP, correct? You're running for the second VP position.
Thank you for bringing that up, Ricardo. I'm running for the second vice president position on the national NENA board. Voting actually started on March 15th. So anybody who's out there, you should have received a ballot via email on March 15th, and it continues until April 14th, I believe. So please go online, look at the candidate statements. There's also a video segment where both of the candidates are on there, and make up your mind, but please vote. I think that's one thing that with NENA, we always have a low vote compared to our membership. We have 17,000 members, and in many of these elections, we're lucky to get a little over 1,000 people voting. So please go out there, judge the candidates based on what you think, and vote. Absolutely. If you haven't received a ballot, you can send something to National NENA. Bree Robinson's the person to contact, and she can make sure that you get them.
Perfect. Now, as we're going into the wrap up of this episode, again, it's been awesome to have you on and learn more about you and your thoughts and everything on dispatching and such, and the industry as a whole. A couple things here. One, why did you want to run for second VP for this position? Because if you end up getting this position, you will eventually, you're in to become also the president of NENA after a couple of years once you go through. So what was one of the reasons why you wanted to run for this position? And then two, what are some of the issues, I guess, that are impacting this industry?
Well, I think that to answer the first question, I've served on the board as the Western Region Director, so I know how important the board is in terms of impacting legislation, what's going on in our profession, and particularly, and I'll tell you when we talk about what issues do I think are critical, the number one issue is getting recognition for dispatchers as first responders and changing the classification. You know, Norma Torres put forward the 911 SAVES Act, which I thought was critical. And Norma has worked as a dispatcher. She worked for LAPD as a dispatcher. And so she's one of the few people in Congress that even understands what dispatch is and what it does. So getting that legislation put forward again and getting the support that it needs. You know, it's not part of the infrastructure bill, but it sure would be nice to get it tucked in there somewhere and have it pass, because I think that it's so critical in a number of areas. It's the first step to getting better pay and benefits for our folks. It also, I think, is going to help recruiting. You know, when we get classification as first responders, that's going to make it a more attractive job for people that may not want to be a police officer or a firefighter, but want to work in public safety. Having that designation helps tremendously. So, you know, I think that, and the perfect example is in California, where we did pass a bill last year that designates dispatchers as first responders, and where that, you know, we didn't know it at the time, but with COVID, it really helped dispatchers get the vaccines that other first responders get. And people say, well, they're not out in the field. Well, they are. They're in working in an enclosed environment where officers, firefighters, et cetera, come in there. It's a petri dish. So thank goodness that our folks were able to be classified as first responders. They might still be waiting in some areas to get these shots. Unfortunately, some probably are, but a lot of dispatchers have gotten the shots and the vaccines. So that's the big issue for me, is let's get dispatchers reclassified. The second one is Next Generation 911 and the funding that's going through Congress right now, and making sure we get that right. I mean, $13 billion is a lot of money, and how it's distributed and what the rules are for that, spending that money is really important. And I think maintaining state control of your, rather than having a huge bureaucracy that oversees everything, is probably a better model. And I think that's the way it's leaning, is this will be grants to the states to bring up 911, a next generation EZNet or network, state by state, having training for folks. There's an oversight board. The makeup of that advisory board is going to be important, I think, making sure that it's people that have experience in communications and 911 and not just anybody, right? Who I've been on advisory boards and commissions where there are well-meaning people that come from one of the public safety disciplines but have absolutely no idea about dispatch or what the problems and issues are there. So that's a couple of the major issues I think that are so important this year. And you know, this is really, like I said, a once in a generation opportunity for us to get the funding we need for next year.
Excellent, man. This has been fun. It's been a lot of fun having you on and learning a lot more about you. And, you know, the call, you know, the earlier call that really sticks with you, and just kind of how that all, you know, panned out and everything. But also, you know, the rest of your career transitioning and moving and just wanting to continue to do more for the industry, man. Thank you. It's been good to have you on.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. This is such a great program, and it gives a voice to dispatchers, you know, and our profession. So thank you so much for what you do, Ricardo. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I will be right back here with you. So for those who are watching, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that is going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/Within the Trenches podcast. This episode has been sponsored by InDigital as well as Rapid Deploy. And this show will always be free, but if you're looking for any bonus content, you can check us out and support us. And that'll be patreon.com/WTT podcast. And thank you so much to all of the patrons. You can also subscribe to our channel, Within the Trenches media channel on YouTube, and you can join the Trenches on Discord. It's a small community that we are building up to have focused conversations on there, all public safety. So you can make sure to check that out. It's open to everyone that's on there. So hit that up as well. And you can see this on Facebook as well as YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone.